Welcome to the Christian Business Concepts with your host, Harold Milby. Christian Business Concepts is dedicated to guiding companies and business owners in becoming effective, efficient, and successful through God's Word and godly principles. Now, here's your host, Harold Milby.
Welcome to this week's Christian Business Concepts podcast. Our vision here is to help you have truly God's success in your business and in your life by helping to apply biblical principles. As you manage your business or you manage your department, that's our goal. That's our vision. Every week, I pray that the Lord will use me to encourage, enlighten, and empower those of you who listen on a regular basis. And let me also remind you that there are additional resources on our website, christianbusinessconcepts.org. And as I've mentioned before, I'm also available to come and speak at your church or at a gathering of business leaders. Just reach out to us and find out more. Now, let's jump into today's topic. Have you ever had a tree or possibly a plant or a shrub that just looked like it had either stopped growing or it wasn't bearing the amount of fruit maybe that you thought that it had the potential to bear? If you ever went to the internet and did some research on what to do, you would have seen one of the first things that they recommend was to do something to that shrub or that tree called pruning. And pruning is something known to, or has been known to horticulturists for thousands of years. I mean, it's not anything uncommon. If you ever, thought about that in the past and maybe you did a little research, you found out the do's and the don'ts and all of the things that you do for pruning. But did you know that there are times there needs to be some pruning that takes place in your business or your organization? It's important to understand what that is and what I mean by that when I talk about pruning your business. And you need to know when to do it, and you need to know how to do it, because it can really help bring life back into the business or organization. Let's take a look at pruning in the natural first, or in the spiritual first, and then in the natural. And then we're going to apply those things to our businesses and organizations. So first, let's look at John chapter 15. We're going to read verses 1 and 2 and then jump to verse 16. It says, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman." This is Jesus speaking. Verse 2 says, "Every branch in me that bears not fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he purges it." Now, this word purge in the Greek is the word prune. So he prunes it, is what he's saying. So every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it that it may bring forth more fruit. Then in verse 16, it says, "You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that you should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatsoever you shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it to you." Now, let me just kind of share with you just shortly here and briefly that the power of pruning and the power of having or the understanding, the power that you receive, I should say, when you have the understanding that God created us to be fruitful. One of the first commands that he told Adam was to be fruitful and multiply. So one of the first things he told him to do was to be fruitful, to bear fruit. And if you are in a business and if you answer to a board of directors or you answer to somebody that's over you, then you are expected to bear fruit. You're expected to have that business grow and to make money. Now, if it is an organization that's a nonprofit organization, there are still things that are being expected of you, and it has something to do with fruit. It has something to do with growth. And so, that is a concept. It's a spiritual concept. I wish I had time to talk about that. But it is a spiritual concept, this concept of pruning. When pruning is done correctly, I think you find that there's going to be about 6 basic reasons that you prune trees and shrubs, and those are going to follow along with what you need to do in business as well. So these reasons will correlate to pruning, in a business as we get into this podcast today. So let's look at these 6 primary reasons that in the natural you would prune a fruit-bearing tree. The first thing that you do, or the reason why you would prune something, would be to maintain healthy plants or shrubs or trees and to make them look better. It involves removing any of the dead or diseased or injured part of the plants. The removal of these weak parts help to really strengthen the rest of the plant or the rest of the tree. And it'll keep the tree from being susceptible to other diseases or pests. So that's the first one. The second reason you prune is to control the growth. And so this is done to control the growth or the size, and it also helps to control the density of the plant. If you don't, in evergreens, if you don't prune them on a regular basis, what happens is the branches get really big, and then when you do go to prune it, it looks like a bunch of limbs, and there's no green in it because you've waited too long to prune it, and now you've lost a lot of that density of that shrub. And so it's important that you prune for that reason. A third reason is it encourages more growth. It encourages more fruit if it's a fruit tree. It stimulates this healthiness, this healthy growth, and the formation of healthy buds. Now, every tree, every shrub is a little bit different, and you study those things and you find when is the best time to prune, when is the worst time to prune. Those things are important, but it really does help to bring forth more growth. When you talk to somebody that manages a wine vineyard, and you talk about the person who's in charge of the vines, you will hear them talk a lot about how important it is every season to prune those grapevines because it helps to bring forth a bigger harvest. And so that's one of the reasons that you prune. Another reason is to help create, maybe some special shapes, special designs. Maybe you're forming your hedges or a trellis. You can use, when we first bought our house, we didn't like the view of the neighbor's backyard. We just didn't like it. They just didn't take care of the yard. And so what we did is we bought these little pencil spruces, and they were about 2 feet tall when we planted them. But we read about them and we knew how far apart to put them, and these things get to be 20 feet tall and about 2.5 feet in diameter. So now we've been here these many years, and now those trees are 18 to 20 foot tall. They've grown together, and so we have that now in the backyard as a boundary, and we don't have to look at what we felt like was something that was unappealing. And so when you prune, it helps you to develop that. It helps you to cut them in such a shape or design that it has purpose. And so that's another reason. Yet another reason is to rejuvenate the old and overgrown trees and shrubs. Now, let me just give you a great example of this. When we had a fairly bad winter this past winter, and we lost one of our little trees that was beside on the side of the house. It was right in the middle, and it was kind of a focal point. And it was just dead. This spring, there was nothing on it. Nothing was happening. It was just dry. You could just snap off the twigs, and there was just no life in it. So my wife said, look, I want you to just cut all that down to the ground. It's dead. We're going to get rid of it. And I agreed, and so that's what I did. So I cut it down to the ground. Well, now it's been a month since I've done that. And this tree that I thought had no life in it, and so did she, all of a sudden now there's all this life, all these leaves, all these things that are coming up from the ground from where we basically pruned it, and we cut off all the dead away from it. And what that does when you prune is it will rejuvenate the old. It'll rejuvenate some of the dead that's on it. It'll cause it to start to come to life again, right? It'll come to life again. And with a lot of this stuff that's overgrown, it'll bring new life. Every time I trim the evergreens that we have and we shape them, you can just see within a couple of weeks the new growth that starts to come. And so that's one of the another reason why you prune. And then lastly, you prune to protect people and property. The weak and the rotted parts of a plant or especially a tree can really be a danger to people. It can be a danger to other plants as well. And so a lot of times you do that to protect people. You do it to protect someone else's property or your property. So what we want to do is I want to correlate, as we move forward today, I want to correlate these 6 reasons, and we're going to apply them spiritually. We're going to apply them to your business or your organization or your department. Okay? So we've got those 6 reasons. Now we're going to apply them into business. So the first thing is the one reason that you want to prune your business at times is you want to maintain a healthy business, and you want to make that business look better from the inside out. You want to make it look better from the inside out. And sometimes you have to cut away the weak. Sometimes you have to cut away the diseased, right? But that's what you want to do in business. Secondly, you do it to control growth. Sometimes a business can grow too fast. And if you're not prepared for that growth, then it'll hurt your business. It could actually damage your business and do more harm than good. If you'll remember, there was a company called Zynga Games. And they were changing the video game market by creating these free downloadable games like Mafia Wars and poker. And by 2011, they were so successful and had so much money, they decided to invest in their own data center. It cost them $100 million, but they decided to develop their own data centers. Now, unfortunately, their innovation in the gaming industry and everything, what they couldn't do was keep up. They couldn't keep up with new game creation. They couldn't keep up with the investment that they made. They couldn't keep up with the fact that they created their own data centers, but they couldn't keep up with that. So that was in 2011. By 2015, they were laying off massive amounts of people, and they had to close those data centers, and they opted to go back to data services. Now, they're just today, they're just a speck of what they used to be because they didn't control their growth. Controlled growth in business is important. Number 3, it encourages more fruitful growth. It'll help form new healthy buds, right? When you do that, when you prune away, a lot of times you prune away some things that are holding you back. You prune away some things that are keeping you from moving forward. And when you do that, a lot of times new growth will come to the business or your department because you had to make that hard decision to prune something. Number 4, it can create new direction. It can reshape the future of your business or organization when you prune things. Number 5, it can bring to life older and more settled team members. So sometimes when you prune away maybe an employee, it helps the other seasoned, maybe older employees. It helps to kind of settle them. A lot of times they're expecting you to prune that particular employee and either move them out of the department or move them totally out of the company. They're waiting for that to happen, and then when that does, it just seems like they really come on strong after that happens. So sometimes it will bring new direct or bring life into these older, more settled team members. And then lastly, it'll protect people and your overall business. It'll protect people and your overall business. So you've got to realize that pruning is something that has to happen in businesses from time to time. Charles Darwin said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." That's what pruning is about. It takes place and it causes change. Now, there are several areas in your business where pruning needs to take effect. Sometimes, you're going to need to make changes in personnel. Okay. So the first area that you may have to prune is going to be employees. Sometimes it's because they have a really nasty negative attitude. And these kinds of attitudes can be cancerous, so you've got to cut it out. You've got to cut that sick part out. You've got to get rid of that bad attitude. I've been in those businesses. I've been a part of businesses when they were sold to another business, and you have some employees that just can't let the past go, and they begin to develop a bad attitude, and within a short period of time after the purchase, they're gone. They just don't know how to move forward with a new vision and a new company that owns them. And so, it could be, too, because they're a wrong fit. I mean, you see this in sports a lot where they'll draft people and then they'll trade them, within a year. Well, it's because they're just not the right fit for their program. And sometimes you hire people and they're just not the right fit for your company. Sometimes they're good people. They have great skill sets, but they're just not the right person for your company. And that can be just as bad for them as it is for your company or your customers even. So if they can't be a team player, it's time to jettison. That's kind of like the word I use when we get rid of employees, but it's time to jettison that employee. It's time to break free from them. It's time to wish them well, but wish them on their way. Don't be afraid to move on these things. Don't be afraid to make those decisions. Sometimes you have to make those decisions. When you hire somebody, you really don't know if you hired the right person. It takes about 6 months before you can figure that out. But having the wrong person on the team, it can be very distractive to other people. It's demoralizing to some of your really key players. Chrysler was on the verge of bankruptcy when the board of directors pruned the then CEO, John Ricardo, and they hired Lee Iacocca. And it was one of the best things that Chrysler ever did. Iacocca was with the company from 1978 until he retired in 1992, and he led the company during the greatest period of success and growth. That happened because they pruned away the other CEO and they hired Lee Iacocca. It can be the difference between life and death. It is so important. When you look in the Word of God, you'll see that God chose Saul to be the first king of Israel. But Saul began to be disobedient. He began to place more confidence in himself than the Lord. And God had to prune Saul from Israel. And when he did, he made David king. And David and his son Solomon were the greatest kings in the history of Israel. Let me tell you, pruning employees can be hard at times because you care about them. Me and the operations manager that I have just had to make a very tough decision recently. Very tough decision. It was very hard. But we were working on a succession plan for him, and we needed somebody that was in a position under him that could replace him. And so the person that we decided to prune was not that person. He was a great worker, good guy, very dependable. It was a very, very tough decision, but he was not going to be the person that was going to replace him. He wasn't going to have the skill sets to do it. And so we had to make that tough choice. Now, fortunately, he was able to find another position in one of our other divisions, and so he still works for the company. But for our department, or for Joe's department, he just wasn't the fit that he needed, so he had to make a change. Another area that you have to prune from time to time is vendors, your suppliers. Sometimes you need to do that. Now, how do you know when it's time to prune a supplier and get rid of a vendor? Well, sometimes it's because you begin to see poor delivery, or they have a lower level of service. Their customer service is starting to fall down a lot and miss deadlines and not give you the information that you need. They're not calling you back. You're getting poor delivery and poor service. That a lot of times is a sign that it's time to prune a vendor. Another sign is a sudden lack of results. And so, in other words, you're not getting the results from them, and you can't really see a change in the near future. Maybe time to prune that vendor and find another supplier. And let me say this, you should always have a backup supplier for every item that you have to order for your business. Always have a second supplier lined up. Then it could be because another sign would be because they're just unresponsive. They're not being responsive to your needs. They're not being responsive to your questions. Another sign is you as a company, you as a business, you've outgrown what their capabilities are. And so now you've got to find a company that has greater capabilities, because that's what you have to continue to grow your business. Another sign would be poor quality, that the quality all of a sudden has gotten very poor. Or maybe you get excessive complaints from your customers. You've got to look at these things, and you should evaluate your vendors twice a year. Now, remember that without vendors, you're out of business. So you have to have vendors, and you need to treat them fairly. But at the same time, if you are dealing with any of these signs that we just talked about, you really need to start looking for another vendor. Another area that you need to prune is your vision. Vision statements don't change very often, nor really should they, but there are times certain things dictate a change. Some of those things are the market changes, or maybe your customers' needs change. Changes in technology, your company maybe changes its focus. These are all reasons it may be time to prune your vision and change it. Companies like Disney, Lego, Amazon, Yellow Pages, they all saw the reason to prune their vision. They all saw something they needed to change. Yellow Pages was all about a printed book that had all of the business addresses and information in there, and they printed these books for all these major cities around the world, or around the country. And what happened was, when the digital age started coming about, they recognized that the printing Yellow Pages was like a buggy whip. It was time to get out of that business. So they changed their vision, and they became a company that was more digital in how they got the information to their customers. So they had to make a change. They had to change their vision and how they attacked what they wanted to do. The nation of Israel had to change their vision several times. When they were in Egypt, they were slaves. They had their vision at that time was just to make it, right? Then when Moses delivered them, their vision changed, and it changed to the promised land, where they saw themselves as conquerors. They had to go into the promised land, the Bible says, and dispossess. In other words, conquer, get rid of the people that were there, because God had promised them that land. So they went from a vision of surviving to a vision of thriving. So that is important. There are times that you may have to prune your vision. Next, there are times that you have to prune your focus. There's a difference between pruning your vision and pruning your focus. In 2013, for example, the CEO Reed Hastings, and you've heard me talk about Netflix before, but here's a follow up to that. The CEO Reed Hastings, he communicated to their employees that he was committing the company to a new focus, and instead of just distributing content digitally, they were going to become a leading producer of original content. Original movies, original series that would be so good that they could win Emmys and Oscars. And since they've made that change, their revenue has tripled and their profits have multiplied 32-fold. So it was a good choice, but he just changed focus. He just pivoted the focus a little bit. Fujifilm, they had to change their focus from photographic film, and they changed it to medical imaging and diagnostic equipment in the medical field. They made a change. They had to refocus their business. And so sometimes there's a need to change your focus. It could be because of the market changes, technology, new opportunities, or new innovation sometimes, or a change even in product demand. In China, it's not uncommon for a factory that's manufacturing, say, lawn furniture one day, and then change the whole manufacturing facility to making bicycles the next day. The bottom line is that while your vision may remain the same, your focus can change. The next thing you need to look at is changing policies and procedures. We recently reviewed the employee handbook given to all of our union employees. What we found was really kind of ridiculous. Let me just mention a couple of things. Number one, no one was allowed to drink water at their station in order to cut down on bathroom breaks. It's kind of ridiculous. The second was that no one could listen to a Walkman while they were at their station. Well, 90% of our workforce didn't even know what a Walkman was. So my point is that sometimes your policies and procedures are old, they're out of touch, they're no longer needed. And if you're going to attract good employees, then you've got to make sure and check that your employee handbook and make sure that your policies are relevant and they're up to date. Changes in policies can be dictated also by several factors, and some of those are when a company changes its strategy or its direction. Another is when maybe new leadership takes control. Another is when a company's purchased by another company or even a merger. So keep in mind, laws change too regarding workplace policies. And you got to make sure that you stay up on the laws so that your policies are in compliance. And that doesn't matter how big or how small you are. Sometimes you've just got to prune certain procedures. We've all heard an employee say at one time or another in their career, well, that employee says, well, that's because that's the way we've always done it. And if you hear this, it should be an immediate red flag to review that specific procedure. So you review your procedures, and that should be done when you're talking about new technology that maybe comes about, or you purchase new equipment, or maybe there's current procedures that are not meeting the demands now. You got to change and prune those procedures. You discover new information, or you hire somebody with additional skill sets. That can always be a big thing. So you've got to prune your policies and procedures at times. And then lastly, you've got to prune your products sometimes. There are times that you need to get rid of those products that are underperforming. Kodak was a leader in photographic film for most of the 20th century. But then they invented the digital camera in 1975. But they dropped the whole idea of the digital camera because they were afraid that it would hurt their film business. So they decided to keep the old buggy whip, the old film, when its time was really over. And you know what? In 2012, they filed for bankruptcy. They never kept up. They didn't change their products. So, some basic thoughts here to consider. When you talk about pruning products, does it actually meet a customer's needs? If it no longer meets a need, then get rid of it. Is that product cannibalizing successful products or initiatives in other areas? If it is, get rid of it. Does it meet your business purpose now and your vision? If it doesn't, get rid of it. If it doesn't, it's just sometimes you just got to move on. Leave that product, move on. Now, as you consider all these areas that we just talked about these potential pruning of these different areas, I want you to keep in mind the reason that pruning may be necessary. Let's go through those 6 areas again. Number 1, to maintain a healthy business and to make the business look better. Second is to control growth. Sometimes a business can grow too fast and do more harm than good. Third, it encourages more fruitful growth. It'll help grow the business. Number 4, it can create new direction and reshape the future of your business. Number 5, it can bring life to older and more settled team members. And number 6, it can protect people and the overall business. So pruning is going to take courage and fearlessness at times. But trust me, the rewards will well be worth it for your business or your department or your organization when you make that choice to do it. Father, I thank you for every person today who's downloaded this podcast. And I pray, Lord, that it ministers to them in a powerful way and that they apply what they've learned to bring success to their business, godly success to their business or their organization or their department, and even in their personal life, Lord. And Lord, I thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, thanks again for downloading this week's Christian Business Concepts podcast. That's all the time we have for you today. Make sure you download other podcasts, share those podcasts with other people. And until next time, remember, Jesus is Lord, and He wants you blessed.
Thank you for tuning into this week's Christian Business Concepts podcast. Go to ChristianBusinessConcepts.com for more information and resources. Be sure to check out other podcasts that will help you take your business and your personal life to a whole new level of success.